Hi, welcome to this channel on magnetic energy technology principles applications. This video is about the flat earth theory, and I wanted to do something lighter because I've just been doing these heavy videos on earth changes, pole shifts, and all this stuff, so hopefully this is a little bit funner of a topic. This is highly unconventional information on this channel, so if you're new to this, please be aware of that. You will not see this model, the model that I represent, which is an etheric magnetic model of the universe. You will not see this in colleges and universities. It will not be taught there or respected in any way whatsoever. Where you will see this model adhered to is in top secret facilities around the world. They are all over this model, and partly that's because they are working with this neutral magnetic energy technology, and so this model goes hand in hand with that technology. And it's interesting because we're so into this kind of global conspiracy because of what's happened with this technology over decades, and that there are so many people that have kept it suppressed, and it's just so there's a little bit of parallel there to the flat earth theory, because that would, if that were true, the level of conspiracy would be so massive. I mean, it would take millions of people to be involved in it. But I am not going to take sides on it. What I do want to do is address some of the questions that the flat earthers put out there and address them from the magnetic energy model point of view, and I hope that makes sense. But it's so weird because there's no way I'm going to convince someone to switch sides on that debate, and I don't even want to try to, especially prior to being able to actually take people into space for free, which hopefully that will happen once magnetic technologies comes out. But anyone at any time will literally be able to go into space and circle around whatever we are living on at that time. And it's just so weird because scientists get shocked, even with the magnetic energy model. And we've seen this personally where, when you find out something that destroys essentially or invalidates your entire education and your entire career, and you think you've known the truth your whole life, and then someone shows you something that completely just overturns all of that, or at least most of it, 90% of it, it's very hard for people to accept that, and they would rather, many people I would say, would rather live in denial and continue to propagate the lies and the brainwashing that they've had their whole lives than to try to embrace this new idea or new model. And we completely understand that. And it's shocking. I mean, there's a lot of shocking things about this model compared to conventional physics and our conventional understanding of all kinds of things, of reality. Even just this idea that we are living in something that is so similar to the Truman Show that it is quite shocking. And when people get through that revelation, and it's that interdimensional awareness that is going to come online after this pole shift, that is going to change people's reality in a very crazy way. But at that point, if you have more enlightenment, then it's not so shocking. So real quick, before I get into these points, if you think about even a semi-advanced civilization, semi-advanced with magnetic technology, it's almost inevitable that they would build something like an Earth ship, like a planet Earth ship, or a replication of Earth, and even a flat model of the Earth that would be really, I mean, quite, if you think about it, with magnetic technology, the whole construction would be done in space. So even the foundation of it would essentially be grown out of etheric magnetic energy in space, fully programmed. It could be absolutely massive, and it could be an incredibly sophisticated simulation that emulates the Earth, and down to, which is really critical, the magnetic resonance, the gravitational resonance, the ionosphere, how the atmosphere works, oceans, everything. It would all be replicated. So this would be like Starship Earth, essentially, and then fully shielded so that you could have people living on this and have all the comforts and all the things that they love about this planet and about our environment and the diversity of species and everything, and then travel literally the cosmos in that vehicle so they could go to other galaxies. It would be able to travel far faster than the speed of light. It would have everything that everyone needs on it, and it would give them the ability to visit other galaxies and spend many, many years on that, and even generations on that ship that would essentially be like a flat Earth. And I mean, I guarantee you that civilizations that have magnetic technology, even somewhat advanced, would already start thinking about the option of doing that, because it would just be too cool and too much fun to be able to do it. And really is what would stop them. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if there are people on our planet right now that have had lifetimes on that type of ship and remember that whole experience and that whole flat Earth experience from that. And that may be partly why they have this ingrained memory and this ingrained sense that the Earth is flat. Because if you lived and you spent your whole lifetime and then there were, you had family and ancestry and everything else and kids that all lived on that, traversing the cosmos, I don't know. I mean, it could be ingrained kind of in their DNA, in their their DNA, their energy body DNA. So anyway, it could be something that's in our future on this planet for sure. So I got to address a couple of these questions because they're so relevant to the magnetic energy model. So, like, one of the questions that flat earthers often will ask is, why doesn't all the oxygen leak out if we're spinning so fast, and why, and there's no shield, like actual physical shield around? Well, so from the magnetic energy model point of view, our ionosphere is like our resonant vibrating shield that is able to contain oxygen. And like I've talked about in other videos, part of the issue of this is if that system is not treated properly, like for example, if you have the worldwide use of electricity, that starts to thin that, and the idea of oxygen leaking out into space becomes a very serious reality or problem that could happen. But the ionosphere is so much more, I think, than science gives it credit for. And in terms of the molecular structure and what it can do and how it interacts with what we call our breathable air, which is like nitrogen, oxygen, it's a whole bunch of chemicals. Its interaction and its ability to contain those is really one of its most important functions. Now, another question is, like, they'll say, why is space dark? So if there's sunlight and if there's all this, sunlight and starlight and all this stuff, then why is space so dark? And so that's the idea that the sun is really inside of a giant shield and the moon is in there. Now the weird thing about that is really in a magnetic energy technology spaceship Earth, you could have an exact simulation of the sun, the moon, and all the stars in their orbits, and really you could actually make them, you could modify them and do whatever you want with them in terms of orbit to make it seem even more realistic. But that idea of having that sun like absolutely close and like inside essentially of a protective dome is extremely possible with the magnetic energy technology. But in this model, in the magnetic energy model, stars produce like this nuclear reaction that they have. The initial light coming out of stars, including our sun, is a magnetic pulse and a light pulse. It's a combination of a magnetic and light pulse that travels roughly 4 times faster than the speed of light. So a light pulse is what's initially emitted from a star, or like our sun. Now, when we were given this information back in the 80s, a few years later, their scientists had actually tested this in a laboratory and produced light pulses that were indeed roughly 4 times faster than light waves. So here's the thing, in this magnetic energy model, a light pulse is kind of like the potential, it's extremely extremely efficient, so it doesn't really emit its light until it hits our ionosphere. And then those pulses elongate into waves and manifest as light and then come down through our atmosphere. But initially, and this would go for all stars, all those light pulses travel roughly 4 times faster than light waves. They're extremely efficient, and they don't light up space because at that point they're almost like light potential from our point of view. Now with magnetic technology, we will be able to detect those light pulses from all stars and not just the light waves. After everything hits our ionosphere and starts to elongate, we'll be out in space and detecting them as pulses, and that's opens up a whole new area of science. So that would, from that model, that would be why space is still dark, even though you have billions and billions of stars emitting light. So the next thing is, how does the atmosphere rotate with our planet? If we're really rotating at 1,000 miles per hour, why isn't it incredibly turbulent? And like science will say, well, after millions of years or whatever, eventually everything kind of caught up and it kind of got into stasis, but at first it was extremely turbulent and all this kind of stuff. And so they're not, like, from an engineering point of view, everyone's still scratching their heads like, is that really possible? If the planet were simply this brute force of gravity due to mass, which in the magnetic model it's not, but if it were and it was rotating at 1,000 miles per hour, wouldn't you have some sort of huge differential of atmospheric spin from drag and then friction and all this stuff? And wouldn't it be more like Venus, where it's just in constant, the atmosphere is in constant turbulence? But here's the thing, in the magnetic energy model, gravity starts just outside of the ionosphere, and the gravity circuit goes from just outside the ionosphere with a trickle out of that, but mostly that it's the pulsed magnetic energy of gravity, relatively neutral pulsing magnetic energy from just outside the ionosphere to the interior of the Earth. Now, so the resonance in those gravity pulses interacts with everything in its path. And so if you want to think of it like that, the atmosphere gases and the ionosphere rotates with that system. So everything in that path kind of moves together. And so it creates, it's interesting because the resonance has this perfect balance. Now remember, these are subatomic, relatively neutral gravity energy pulses that interact with everything else, what we would call matter or gases or all other molecular structures. They interact with them to a certain degree. So there's like this 50 shades of gray degree, and it's somewhere in there that they interact with them so that there's not too much push, there's not too much pull. It's kind of that sweet Goldilocks spot. And this isn't by accident. This is a very, very well designed system that creates a gravitational field that extends beyond the ionosphere and then has everything kind of moving with it with resonance all around, so that you don't have this incredibly turbulent weather all the time. You have weather patterns that are sustainable for life. You have the moon interacting with that and helping balance temperatures and helping create weather patterns. You have all these other factors that are just enough to create just enough wind and just enough storms, and in a balanced system, it creates quite a harmonious system that is very sustainable for life on this planet. But it's not just this crude force of a spinning, rock that's all based on mass. The gravity is not a function of mass in this model. And the proof of that is, well, where's your proof on that? The proof of that is, and you can check with your local top secret facility, is if you pulse a magnetic field and you match that gravitational pulse, if you stop either the push or the pull of that force, you completely negate the gravity. You completely negate the gravitational field or the gravitational circuit, if you will. And that allows for basically anti-gravity transportation and all it opens up the whole field of science for anti-gravity and everything interacting with gravity. And so And that's the proof. It takes that certain pulse rate because that system has a different pulse rate for basically every planet. So that's now, here's another question. How is it that the oceans adhere to the circular shape of the Earth and everything? And this also comes back to that gravitational circuit. So it's not just some crude force that's just willy-nilly holding the oceans in place. It's a gravity circuit that feeds from the top and goes into the interior of the Earth. So the oceans are part of that, so that it's just enough to allow, like, for example, waves and depressions in the ocean and rises in the ocean, tides, and all of these things. So it's not too much pressure from the gravitational circuit, and it's not too light to allow water to just simply, get flat everywhere it goes. It's just enough to hold it in place around the planet in a perfectly designed gravity circuit that keeps really a planet that's predominantly water still in a not perfectly, but in a spherical configuration, if you will. Now, in the flat Earth model, it would be the same thing, because you would have the gravity circuit feeding from the top. You'd still have an ionosphere. You'd have a protective layer and a protective shield around it, and the gravity would feed, because you have to match the resonance of the Earth gravity in order to have long-term space travel be safe for the human body. Our genetic makeup, our physical makeup, everything about us is intimately connected to this planet, and we cannot survive outside of this field without creating a basically identical gravitational circuit that mimics this field with perfection. Otherwise, we will have a host of physical problems that happen, and energy problems. We're talking problems down to the subatomic level, down to the energy body level. There's all kinds of problems that will happen while we are incarnated if we leave this planet without the proper magnetic circuits and proper magnetic pulse rate of artificial gravity, keeping us safe and keeping everything in alignment with our bodies and energetically, down to cellular structure. Everything is resonance, and it's extremely important that we would have that technology. So on this spaceship Earth, you would have basically the same idea, because you can't just go flying all over the place and have this ship, and however it would move. You still want the same exact effect with the waves and the tides and everything, so that the life can flourish in that environment. So there's a lot of other points that we can go over. So if you are a flat earther and you believe in that, please send in, or you can just do it through the comments, more like questions about why is this or why is that, and I'll see if I can try to answer them from the magnetic energy model point of view. If you don't believe in that and you have other points, that's fine. I like welcoming comments, of course, because it's great to keep this debate going and to discuss how this etheric magnetic energy model relates to really any topic that we can think of, and if there is a relationship, if there's a connection. So thank you for watching this, and I will see you next time.